All right, Serena, I am so excited to talk to you today. You are a successful entrepreneur turned realtor and author. For nearly 18 years, Serena led her multi-award winning brand experience agency, Tigress Events, to national recognition with 18 awards and numerous nominations. In 2022, you merged with another agency to take your business to the next level, freeing up your time to focus on your real estate career and active investing. Serena was also VP of Events at the Toronto chapter of the American Marketing Association and recently completed a book, The Accidental Entrepreneur, that chronicles her journey from a troubled childhood to a self-styled entrepreneur, sharing lessons learned and mistakes made to inspire others facing similar challenges. When she's not working, Serena enjoys spending time with her family, traveling, fitness, and supporting sustainability efforts, including a recent trip to Thailand to volunteer in an elephant nature park. That was awesome. I loved hearing about that. So Serena, welcome. I was so excited to talk to you. It's funny, I used to work as one of the people at your brand agency as one of the representatives. So that's how we connected. We recently connected on LinkedIn again, and we both had a lot of commonalities in real estate investing. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. And I would love to hear, just to get started, after the success of your brand experience agency, like what led you to real estate investing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it started actually through an opportunity back in 2017 where we started staffing events with this real estate education organization, ironically staffing their events in Texas and Florida, of all places. And at the time, I didn't know what they did. I just got the pictures back. I was like, oh, Scott McGilvery is part of them. So obviously he's fairly well known, but I just didn't know anything about what they actually did. At that point, I had a fairly large team of 8 or 10 of us. They're all kind of busy staffing and planning events. So I wasn't super close to it, but I started to see ads for the Wealth Tour coming to Toronto. And at that point in time, I had sold my first rental property, which was a short-term rental in Fort Myers, Florida. And I just didn't know what to do next. So I was just kind of holding on to the money, trying to decide what would be the best next move. And then welcome the Wealth Tour. And I kind of went to that, and they give you this taste of all these different real estate investing strategies and things that you could be doing. Of course, they give you a taste. They don't give it all away. So that led into their 3-day conference, and then that led into a membership. So I ended up going to their investor summit in June of 2018, and I did a lot. I bought 2 pre-construction properties. I invested in a land deal, a few syndicated mortgages, and all these different things. And at that point in time, I'd had different coaches and mentors that had encouraged me to invest. And I was looking at it from the standpoint of, I'm in a service-based business, so we're only making money as much as we're out there delivering services. And if I'm going to start a family and I have to take a step back, I didn't know what kind of an impact that would potentially have on the business. So I was trying to create other sources of income so that I could decrease my dependency on the money coming in through my company and just, leave as much retained earnings in the company as I could, so that when that time came, I was in a better position just to just in case anything happened. Like, who knows how it's going to run if you're not right at the helm, right? So that's really what inspired a lot of the action that took place.
Yeah. And what I love is you were so forward thinking, right? And I think that's a lot of time what's missing is we have these life events as women, like becoming a mom. That's similar to me. I have 2 little kids, and that changed everything, really wanting to be available for them and setting yourself up in a way where you can be, because of taking yourself out of the equation, essentially, from investing. So I don't think enough people do that, but you were very, very clear on what you wanted to do. And with all the different investments that you've done, why was the passive real estate investing of most interest to you? I mean, obviously there's the life experience that you had, but what really appealed to you in that regard?
Yeah, I think really it's the cash flow. I have had a couple of properties now between the short-term rental and then later a long-term rental. And honestly, they just didn't cash flow the way that I expected them to. So I think that was a really big thing with a lot of the passive investing. There's kind of that immediate return, right? So you could be anywhere from 15 to 20+%. And you're actually getting that back in your account every single month. So it's money that you can really live on and depend on. At that point in time, when I started doing all this investing, one thing led to another, and I got introduced to a mortgage broker, and that really led into the money that I later came to depend on more. Nobody knew that COVID was coming, and you can't really run events in a lockdown, at least not the way that we were running events. So I was able to look at my situation and the money I had available to invest with, which primarily came from my home equity line of credit. And I was able to kind of ramp that up. So initially I started slowly okay, I'm going to make this much money. But then I was like, I could be making so much more money, like just by diversifying it and placing it with different things. And, that was what really saved me during COVID. Initially, it started as, if I'm going to take a year off when I have my first child, so like next thing you know, we're in this pandemic that lasts for 3 years, and, just so many things were changing and there was a lot of uncertainty. So I was really able to, save myself in an otherwise very difficult situation because I stopped taking money out of my company for the first time since 2006. So if I hadn't been proactive to learn all these things and build these relationships, I think I would have been a very, very different experience and a pretty stressful, time being a new mother and just trying to manage everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that sounds like you kind of built up your risk tolerance. Like you kind of tried a few things and then saw over time what worked and then kind of built on that and focused on that. And I do want to touch on one thing you mentioned. You mentioned you kind of did the traditional way of investing with owning your own properties and that the cash flow wasn't as you expected. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like what really happened to affect the cash flow?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, maybe I was just too naive and just trusted what people were telling me. And, with the short-term rental, I bought that in Florida because the dollar was at par. So I was able to buy something fairly cheap, like it was 125,000 US. And the realtor that I specifically used, they're an old-time family friend of, family that I'd had down there for a long time. And they said, this will be booked all but 8 or 9 weeks for the year. So I was really thinking like, we're going to have it booked based on short-term rental rates for like 9 or 10 months a year. And it was the opposite. Like January to March were always booked. I could probably book them 5 years in advance if I wanted. And we were vacant almost the entire rest of the year. So if I was lucky, like I was posting ads, I was trying to promote it. Like I was really trying to get it booked, but it just seemed like maybe because of the location, like it was at a golf course and country club, nobody wanted to go there the rest of the time. So we were only, sometimes we get someone for like a month here or a couple of weeks there, but for the most part, like it was vacant a lot. So the money that I had coming in, it barely even covered the operating costs because you've got high HOA fees, you've got the membership fees, you've got, just all the maintenance. So say that was $14,000 a year. I was bringing in consistently the 10,005 if I hopefully could make up the difference. And then that didn't even cover like what I paid to buy the property, right? So I couldn't mortgage it in either country at that point in time. But I used money from different sources. And I basically ended up using money from my company by lowering my income a little and taking like a bonus at the end of each year for 25, 30 grand. And then that would just lump sum. And I was able to pay off in 4 years, I guess. But it wouldn't, I took what they said at face value. And now there's things like AirDNA and things that you can use to really research what you can potentially expect in an area and see what the demand is like. Like if we had been at like a condo at the beach, maybe we would have had that 9 or 10 months a year, but it just didn't work out. And then with the second property, which was a long-term rental in Edmonton, at the time there was this 4 ways to win that I was looking at, and they had positioned it that you'd have your rental income and your utilities separate. And when it came time to actually rent it, the property manager I hired said that no one would really go for that. So we had to include $500 a month of utilities in the rent. And then I think there's a couple of other things. So instead of cash flowing like 800 or 900 a month, I was lucky to be making 2. So that's not great. And even as time passed, like 3-4 years in, that wasn't really changing. So I ended up selling it, did well, made money on both of them when I sold them. Like I made about 100,000 on each of them when I sold them, but it definitely wasn't money that you could depend on like during the time that I owned them.
Yeah. And that's a challenge, right? I think it's the mistaken notion, especially with Airbnb, because it looks like it's such a high amount of rent, but there's also the management cost, the time, the hassle, because clearly you knew how to promote, you come from that kind of world. So it's like if somebody who has that skill to promote, at that time wasn't able to occupy it, then it's just something that may not work in that market, which you discovered.
It was just where it was, I think, honestly. Like if it had been in a different area, then I'm sure, like if it had been Orlando, like I'm sure that wouldn't have been a problem. It's just where I went. And again, I was going based on people I thought that I could trust that were kind of telling me what the other owners had experienced. And they'd even said that they'd help us get it rented, and they didn't bring us one rental in like 4 years. So it just didn't pan out the way that we expected. And, still was a good investment. At least it got me started, but it definitely wasn't the life-changing money you can really depend on. So
yeah, you were still profitable at the end. It's good, but it still wasn't, it was a lot, very time consuming. It sounds like regardless, like very time consuming, especially when you have other things going on, which is running business and all the things. Right. And in that regard, like you said, it's not that it was unsuccessful at the end. You still made money. So with the investments that you have made in running a business, what do you think is that one thing that has really contributed to your success overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the private lending has been number one for me. Like I've done, I just signed off on my 58th deal in 5 years, and almost half of those have just been in the last year alone. So initially I was working with one mortgage broker, but then when I wanted to do more, I was like, well, I don't feel comfortable just, putting all my eggs in one basket. So I just reached out to the community that I am part of and just started reaching out to see who had opportunities. And then I really diversified it. So I have about 18 or 19 different companies and people that I work with right now. And I feel like they're people that I can really trust. And they've been really like dependable with the money that's coming in and stuff like that. So I've just put as much money as I have available to really work. And then the result is that I've made about triple last year than I made in the highest year I ever had in my business. So, and that's just from signing the contracts. Like the only work I do is just not even depositing because I have auto deposit. I just track payments.
It's
So
not even mailbox money anymore, right? It's like just
yeah,
lands in your bank account. It's even that much.
yeah. So it's like payday, right? Multiple times a month. So
Yeah.
and that's definitely been great. I'd say the one thing to be mindful of is just obviously there's no appreciation to it the way that there is with a property. So I look at it like I put some money towards that. And then right now I'm looking at where I plan to put the money for my next acquisition. So I do want that long-term, appreciating asset or assets as well, but it's good to be diversified in both areas.
Yeah. And it sounds like at the end of the day, it's the decisions that you're making, right? Like, do you need cash flow right now, or are you looking for
Yeah.
like that long-term wealth building? And that's
Yeah.
also why I like syndications, because you're getting a little bit of both. You're getting the cash
Yeah.
flow and you're getting a pop when it sells. But at the same time, you want to use those returns responsibly and then
Yeah.
maybe put them into a cash flowing asset once you've like built
Yeah.
it. So many strategies. And
Mhm.
what's the one thing you'd say with all those partners that you've invested with? If somebody's looking to do this and they're like, I'll do the work and I'll go find people, but what is that one thing you're really looking for when you're looking for
Yeah.
put your money with? Because these aren't small sums of money. Like we're talking like
Yeah.
50K, 100K plus, right?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I generally now I'm looking for the returns. Like obviously interest rates have gone up considerably over the last year. So initially at the beginning of last year, like I placed some money that was like 12%, 14%. Well, when interest rates are 3%, that's a pretty good spread. But when interest rates climb up to like 7.5, that's literally half of your profit. So as those funds have matured, I flip them into things that are like 16, 18% plus, just so that I can make sure I'm covering my margin since I'm using my home equity line to cover that. So I've always made more than I really need. The benefit there is that it's paid off some other things. Like I dump money into my TFSA for some long-term land deals, but the private lending has paid those off. So it's kind of contributing to that wealth. And I think honestly, my biggest lesson is just for me, because of a couple things that got very significantly delayed. I generally try to diversify and have no more than 50,000 per deal or 100,000 per borrow, but split across two deals or two properties. Because I did 3 deals initially that were, I think it was about 350,000 across the 3 deals, and one and a half, others a half, I don't know, but one and a half of those got really delayed. So we're sitting at like 5 years since I invested, and they were all like 12, 18-month terms. So they've just gone on and on and on. And the way that their deals were structured is that half of the interest was paid up front, half at the back end. And because it's gone on for so long, chances are that back end interest won't even materialize. So at this point,
Yeah.
I just want to get my principal investment back. All the other private lending I've done is paid it off. So it'll be like a little nest egg when I eventually get it off. But I think you just have to know that, sometimes there could be delays. So I'd rather have a delay on 50,000 than on 200,000. So that's why it's important to work with, I think, just a volume of different people that you trust instead of putting it all too much in the same place.
Yeah. And what I really like that you mentioned as well is that you will adjust your strategy based on what's happening in the market. Like I know,
Yeah.
for example, a lot of us are doing HELOCs. So Serena and I are both Canadian, but we were taking the HELOC loans on our properties. And when the interest rates were really low, like 2-3%, you could get like that really great spread and it felt really easy peasy. But it's
Yeah.
now that strategy, unless you know and have those connections or you've built those connections, which you have, finding those higher returns to still make that strategy work becomes more challenging.
Yeah.
So it's really about like building those relationships and building that network, which it sounds like you've
Hmm.
done. You really put yourself in the positions with the right circles to
Yeah.
find those deals to kind of align with your needs at that moment in time, which in life that will shift. But it is becoming increasingly challenging to make those high returns. And with those higher returns, are those higher risk deals? What is that? Yeah. Okay. So it's higher risk deals.
I mean, so as much as everyone's like, they're so risky, like they're all pretty much promissory notes, general security agreements. That being said, it's not like you're just walking down the street handing out money. Like this is all real estate investors. There's always a property included. So if push comes to shove, like that's ultimately your leverage in a sense. Again, just going with people that I trust and seeing the work that they've done and vetting them, but just from other investors doesn't mean that something can go wrong, but it's unlikely that all 20 deals I have going on are all going to go wrong at the same time. So I kind of look at it that just by diversifying, that's how I kind of insulate my risk in some different ways, but everyone's got a different risk tolerance, right? So some people would prefer like a first position mortgage, but then you're looking at maybe 10% or 11% compared to like 18%. So depending on how you're planning to fund that, for me, again, using a HELOC, like I've been chasing the interest. So that's been more of a priority to me. Like, again, I wouldn't work with them if I didn't trust them. But I think some people just, the concept of that really makes them nervous. So some people don't touch that at all. But it just, it depends on where they're coming from and what they want to do.
For sure. And you built up to this, right? Like it wasn't like day one, you're going in, like this has been a big process for you getting like step by step. And so for somebody getting started, like what would you say is the hardest part of getting into this passive, lending world? Cause I think for a lot of people, it's, especially for me, when I first like heard about it, it seemed like this, foreign idea, like, wow, like this world of things that I had no access to. So what would be that advice you give to somebody who's interested, but they don't really know where to start?
Yeah, I think the community is a big part of it. So being surrounded by other real estate investors, and obviously in those instances, you're working direct to the investors. And then also mortgage brokers, like they have access to a lot of different people looking to facilitate those deals as well. So I right now have a roster of the 5 or 6 mortgage brokers. So I do a number of deals with them. And then there's others that I work with directly. So I think just finding the communities, even on Facebook, for example, there are a number of different groups specific to real estate investing and private lending and stuff like that. You still then need to go and do your own due diligence. So work with a lawyer that can vet the deals, can look into the properties that are listed, look into the financial picture of that individual investor. There have been a couple of deals I've turned down because it looked like they'd, refinanced their property like 4 times in the last 5 years. So it makes you wonder, well, why are they doing that? Where's the money going? And like, are they really going to be solid to pay it back? And is there enough equity to pay it back if anything goes wrong? So doing that kind of due diligence on them, like getting credit reports, checking insurance, like if they're doing renovations, for example, they need builder's insurance, not just homeowner's insurance. So just making sure that you have all of those things in order to make you feel comfortable to go ahead.
Yeah. You become like a full-time money manager, essentially. It's like your own bank. Like it sounds passive, but you're actively caring for your money. Like you're a steward of your money to make sure that it all flows together properly and protecting it, right? Because you don't have that outside source kind of looking over things, which I mean, can we really rely on the banks? I don't know. But you really need to put that care forward, which, you learn and you do. And then for somebody, that wants to improve the real estate investing business, like, you've done a little bit of everything. What would be that thing that you'd say would improve it for them in general, no matter what they're doing? What's that one thing you could do?
Yeah, I think again, just your network is so important. So initially I started with this bigger network. There's probably about 3,000 of us across Canada and some in the States. So there's just I'm in a private Facebook group, so you can see what people are doing like all the time, and just how people are leveraging other people's money to acquire and joint ventures and all these different strategies. And then I also joined a more intimate, smaller group. I think there's 65 of us in total as part of a mastermind. And we have like weekly calls, there's expert speakers, there's trips and programming around it and stuff like that. And that's really led into some other unique opportunities as well. So I think it's just, by connecting with as many people as possible, it'll help like reduce the learning curve. And, my trajectory is kind of like this, and then it kind of went like this a little bit in the last year, and it'll kind of continue along that for a while, but it just depends on what you want out of it, right? Like people might be really happy in their jobs and be in a higher income earner, and they just want to place things for the long term. Other people want that financial freedom or that time freedom, right? So I think you just need to understand your own objectives and try to work with it accordingly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also like, or maybe a high earner and they want some tax incentives or advantages. Like there's so many
Yeah.
factors that you can use the real estate investing for.
Yeah.
And as cliche as it sounds, like network is your net worth. And
Yeah.
I've kind of been discovering that this season as well, because I was that realtor that would be doing cold calls for 6, 7 hours a day. And I was okay to
Yeah.
do that. And I did well, but you kind of elevate to looking at, okay, well, what is the smarter way to do this? And it's finding those right people to connect with,
Hmm.
where you can
Yeah.
really reduce a lot of that legwork, by making, if you make a few really great relationships, those people can give you access to their whole network or whatever that looks
Yeah.
like. So it sounds like you're in that season as well, where you've kind of figured out that this is the best way to make the most of your time and elevate your income, which you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
investing. And I would really love to, touch on the book you wrote, because that's a huge endeavor in and of itself. So please
Yeah.
share me a little bit more about that. Yeah, I'd love to know.
Yeah. So I guess my whole life, like my childhood was crazy. So my parents split when I was 4 years old, and then just over a year later, my brother died in a really tragic accident, um, largely due to some negligence on behalf of some family members. So that was just like really defining in a lot of ways. And I think just going through that and then bouncing around with like custody issues and family members, and just there was a lot that I went through over a period of probably 12 years, and just growing up, everyone's like, your life's been so crazy, like you're gonna have to write a book about this one day. And then that just kind of planted the seed, and then I became an entrepreneur at the age of 23, and never had any intentions of running my own business, but it literally fell in my lap. Just was offered the opportunity to be a BA and then a manager and then a partner, and then my partner left the business 4 years in. So I just had to decide what to do. So, the book evolves from, all that childhood and all the tragedy that I went through, and then how it kind of just paved my path as an entrepreneur, because I knew that no one's handing me anything. Like I'm paying for school myself, I'm paving my own way. Like I can't depend on anyone. And, my whole goal, like when I started working, was just have my own house, just to give myself my own sense of stability. So real estate was important to me in that sense. And I hadn't at that point even thought about anything beyond my primary residence, but I just knew like, I want to know, like, this is my home. This is like my safe place. But basically the book showcases that whole path and journey, and how I discovered really real estate investing, how that was encouraged to me by a mentor and a coach that I had. And then I basically ended up writing the book at a writing retreat in 2018. And then I got about 2/3 of the way there, finished it over the following few months. And then I just had no idea what to do next. Like I just hit a wall when it came to publishing. So I just put it on the back burner. And then when COVID happened, I was like, well, my business is not operating. Yes, I have an infant, but I'm not bombarded with like dozens and hundreds of emails every single day. So I enrolled for my real estate license. And then between those courses, I spent time editing. So I'd take like 2, 3 weeks in between courses, found an editor to work with. So we did several rounds of editing, like content, spelling, grammar, like all of that stuff, and just kind of like rotated between those, like usually a few mornings a week, on and off, kind of in between. And that took about a year. So it ended up going to market October of 2021. So coming up, I guess it's been a year and a half since it came out.
Yeah.
But again, it just showcases a lot of those like lessons, learnings, the challenges that I went through. And I think sometimes it resonates with people on the personal side, like if they've gone through these struggles within their own family, and then also for entrepreneurs and just, people that are trying to create their own path for themselves.
Yeah, it's amazing like how you can actually become bigger. I think sometimes when there's challenges in life, you think it's going to just bring you down, but there's that resilience that gets developed and you make that decision. Okay, am I going to let this define me, or am I going to define myself
Yeah.
essentially and build a bigger future for, especially for your daughter, and just create that environment. So
Yeah.
that's powerful. And like I said, it takes a lot to write a book, and with an infant too.
Yeah.
But I'm sure if you're anything like me, which it sounds like you like working,
Yeah.
it probably gave you something to do as well out of
Yeah.
baby time, right? Because baby time is
Yeah.
lovely,
Yeah.
but it's also a little bit becomes your world, which is
Yeah. It's a
challenging
lot.
after
I
you come
mean,
out of, yeah, a
I'd say a
professional
couple mornings a
environment.
week was like a good way to structure it. Like
For
my husband
sure.
open schedule, and I would take at the time my lonely empty office, because we were all gone because of COVID. So I'd spend usually like 2, 3 hours twice a week. And that's kind of what got me through the course. And then it also helped me finish up the book and get it published.
Nice. And where can people find that?
So it's on Amazon. The easiest thing is just on my link tree. So it's linktree/. Serena Holmes or Serena Holmes author. Like the Serena Holmes author has all the links to all the retailers, and with Serena Holmes has links to a lot of different things.
Awesome. All the things that you're up to.
Yeah.
Well, Serena, it was an absolute pleasure. I loved how much information you gave, and I know can really give people access to other options because there's so much more than
There's an
traditional.
easier way.
There's an
Yeah.
easier way, and it's innovative, and the future is just naturally more collaborative. And, you know, especially with the internet, like everything is, you know, it's like, oh, the internet, but it really makes a difference when you're seeing that people's lifestyles, we want this. There's a need, right? People aren't as handy, you know, they want to still invest and leverage real estate, but doing it in a way where they can still fulfill on what it is that they're committed to individually, right? So that was wonderful. And how do you like to contribute or give back?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have as much time now as I used to because of having my 3-year-old running around consumes a lot of time. But like I mentioned, I've given to tons and tons of different wildlife causes over the years. So that's been really big. Spent a couple of weeks in the jungle of Thailand, volunteering with the elephants, volunteering with like associations. I sat on the board for Camp Trillium, which is a camp for children with cancer. So I sat on that board for a few different years. So it just, you know, every different season takes you in different places. But as my daughter gets a little bit older, I'm sure I'll have a bit more time to get back into the community and all of that.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Serena. I really appreciate your time today and all the information. And yes, definitely check out Serena's book, The Accidental Entrepreneur. You can find it on Amazon. And Serena, thank you. I look forward to learning more from you in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Talk soon.